Welcome to the Christian Anarchist edition of Outlaw Theology with the Whiskey Preacher. I'm your host, Phil Shepard, better known as the Whiskey Preacher. Not shying away from controversy, I'm extremely excited about having this controversial conversation here on Outlaw Theology surrounding the lesser known subculture that's found within Christianity called Christian Anarchy. To have a semi-intelligent conversation, and mind you, I use the word intelligent very loosely here, I brought in my good friend, internationally renowned house church planner and Christian anarchist, John Jensen. So without further ado, let's get to the interview that I had with John earlier in the day. Well, thank you, John, for joining the Whiskey Preacher on Outlaw Theology. I'm real excited that you're here.
It's good to be here.
So, for the folks who have no idea who you are, you're John Jensen. You live in Long Beach, California. You, as I said in the introduction, you are a renowned international church planner. You've been in ministry for 20 years. Is that right?
Yeah, a little more than that. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. And you have a great beard and a great haircut.
Yes, I'm quite proud of them.
And you've been known for your beards before.
I have grown some nice beards. Yes.
Yeah, you call it the Fidel, right?
The Fidel has the mustache.
Oh, excuse me.
This is a more Amish style beard.
Oh, Amish Long Beachian.
Yes. Yeah.
You started your own style. You can start wearing the straw hats too?
No.
They won't go so well in the construction sites?
Yeah, they don't look good on the construction site. So I'm barely able to get away with this. My boss hates it.
It's not OSHA approved.
No.
No.
But, I'm the boss, so I don't actually do much, I just,
Spoken like a true contractor.
yeah, I just, exploit the labor. That's what I do.
Okay, so let's just jump in. I know you've got a limited amount of time, and I know that you said you've been in the ministry for over 20 years, and you have found this subculture within Christianity called the Christian Anarchy movement. Can you tell us, well, A, you didn't start with the Christian anarchists, did you? Because I've seen pictures of you in your nice Stephen Kirsch Chapman hair, and your denim shirt, and Raquel, your wife, and co-pastor, all Christian church ladied up.
Yes. Well.
Good thing I don't have that picture on. I'd be putting this on.
I'll send it to you.
The before and after.
See, I grew up in the punk rock scene.
Yeah.
When I became a Christian, I actually really got born again, like in the old-fashioned sense, and so I believed that because I didn't know any better, that meant that I had to dress and act and be like the church people, because that's all I knew. But after a while and understanding more, then I began to realize that, Jesus liked me the way I was, and so I could basically express myself the way I wanted to. So, so that's kind of why over a period of time, we basically, we didn't, I don't think we became more radical, but we returned to some of our more radical roots. So that's kind of what happened with us. But yeah, the Christian anarchy thing was an interesting. It was interesting because I had a friend who knew about my punk rock roots, who basically gave me the book. Christianity and Anarchy by Jacques Ellul. And so I read that book and I was just like, this is it. This is it. This is what makes sense. It's brilliant. But I found in it a lot of ideas, but not a lot of methodology or practical application. I didn't actually learn a lot about what Jacques Ellul did because I could have learned a bit from that, but I just tried to do it the best I could as far as living out some of those ideas. Then I was introduced to Dave Andrews, who is a good friend, still mentor, and he wrote a book called Christianarchy, where in that he tells a lot of stories. And then I kind of realized, oh crap, we're actually leading a lot of the same types of events and communities and stuff like that, but he had thought it out and lived it out a lot better than I had. So I've learned a lot from Dave Andrews. I think he's a great example of what Christianarchy actually is.
And before we go any further, so for folks who are, this is the first time they've ever even heard the idea of Christian anarchy, can you, in basic terms, explain what Christian anarchy is and how can Christianity and this idea of anarchy coincide with one another?
Okay, well, the first thing you have to realize is what anarchy isn't. Because in today's society, and I think that's basically, it's because of the powers that be. You know, it's not the little groups in the grassroots that write the dictionaries. You know, so the powers that be, they like to make the idea of anarchy mean something that it doesn't actually mean. The word anarchy is basically two words put together. The first is an, which means against, and the word archy, which means the powers. So the word monarchy is a singular mono power, archy. It's the king is ruler over everything. Well, what anarchy means is that it's against the idea of people having power over other people. It does not mean disorder. It does not mean chaos. What it means is people living in a way where they do not oppress other people. Within that, there can be leadership, there can be order, there can be organization. And oftentimes what you see in anarchist circles is a very high level of organization. But at least what the goal is that you do not have hierarchy. So you have a mutual organization. Leadership happens from a position of, or not from a position, leadership happens from a situational ethic rather than a positional one. So there's times where I will take up the lead. When it comes to teaching in our community, I teach more than other people do because it's what I do. But when it comes to a lot of other things that are going on in our community, other people will take the lead, particularly when it comes to administration, because I can't administrate at all. So now the difference between pure anarchist thought and Christian anarchist thought would be that in Christian anarchist thought, we're actually, at least from my position, we're actually wrestling with the issues biblically. And from all that I can understand biblically, it's the idea that there is only one that can rule, and that is God. So any of our human rulership would have to in some way not fit into the mold of God. And in addition to that, God shows us the way rulership happens because he still calls Christ the King. But in Christ, what we see is that kingship lives itself out not by having power over people, but by giving its power up for people. So Christ, rather than ruling over people, Christ comes as a servant and serves people and then makes the ultimate sacrifice of giving himself up in love on the cross, to the point where even those that are nailing him to the cross, he says, Father, forgive them. See, that's an anarchist perspective from a Christian worldview. Now, the interesting thing is, as you go through the Bible, you see that this ethic is actually there right from the beginning. And that's the thing. As I learned more and more, I was so shocked that we have this hierarchical view of everything. And if you get into it, you got people that talk about angels and demons and all this kind of stuff, and everything has hierarchies, and God is over this, and the Father is over the Son, and is over and it's all this thing. And we function as a society in those ways. So we read God into that the same way. But we can go through the Bible all the way back to the beginning, and we can see these principles in effect. Some of the real obvious ones would be when the people of Israel come to Samuel the prophet and they say, give us a king so we can be like other nations. And Samuel goes to God and says, they want a king. And God's response is, Samuel, go ahead and give them a king. They haven't rejected you in asking for a king. They've rejected me. And if they have a king, just let them know that the king is going to tax them. He's going to send their sons off to war. He's going to take their daughters as slaves to work under him or to be his concubines. He's going to tax them. He's going to do all of the oppressive things that kings do, because that's what kings do. Okay? So you see some of the points of view that are, it's like you go, oh crap, that's pretty darn apparent what's going on there. But you can also see it in the more the hidden things that you see when you just pay a bit more attention. It's like once you begin to see what God's doing, you see things like in Joseph in Egypt. Oh, Joseph was sent to Egypt so that he could save his family. Wait a minute. Joseph went to Egypt. He had a particular gifting of God so that he could understand dreams. He gets the dream of Pharaoh, understands that the famine is going to follow the 7 years of plenty. Pharaoh puts him in the highest position of governmental power. And what does he do? He taxes the crap out of the people, which I don't actually, in this case, have a problem with. He stores the food for when the famine comes. And because he's an agent of God's mercy, when the famine comes and the people need the food that he's already saved up to give them, what does he do with it? He generously shares it all with the people, right? No. He says, okay, give me all your livestock and I'll give you some food. And when all their livestock's done, he says, okay, give me all your land and I'll give you some food. And when all their land is gone, he says, sell me yourselves and I'll give you some food. So at the end of this 7-year period of famine, rather than using God's blessing on him to take care of the people under his charge and be a servant to them, he gets confused by power and uses it to enslave all of Egypt. And then his family comes calling. It says he gives his family the best land. Is the best land usually unclaimed land just sitting out there?
It depends if you believe in manifest destiny or not.
No, but seriously, if it's the best land, isn't there usually someone there?
Yes, that was my point.
Right.
That was a joke. Exactly. Us as Americans taking the land away from the Native Americans.
We did the exact same thing. But so in this case, Joseph takes land from someone else and gives it to his own family. Then what happens? A Pharaoh comes to power that did not know Joseph. And the exact same structure that Joseph used to oppress the people of Egypt winds up backfiring and oppressing his own people for 400 years of abject slavery. Now, see, this is the thing. Whether you believe that was a literal story or not, the fact is it's in the Bible to teach us something. And we've had our eyes closed for too long to see that there's messages within the messages there. And one of the messages is that when you start using power over other people, it very quickly becomes compromised, and you wind up corrupting the wielder of the power, and I think even the people that are being held under the power. And so as we look through the scriptures, we see countless examples of that, of God basically showing us a way where rulership and leadership and community all function in God's eyes from a completely different ethic, an ethic where those of you who want to be great should be a slave to everybody. That's what the essence of Christianity.
So, and would it be fair to say then Christian anarchy, like anarchy itself, in the ethos of it, it is fighting against the oppression of the power holders? Is that fair to say?
Depends what you mean by fighting.
Okay. This is what I'm getting to. How has the overall Christian church with a capital C been the oppressors, and how has the subculture of Christian anarchy fought, in whatever term you want to use as fighting, fought against those oppressions?
Well, what you see throughout Christian history is you see that the first 300 years, the Christian church was very anarchic. It didn't have a creed. The scriptures were not condensed into one form that was acceptable by everybody. It was very diverse. And I'm not one of those people who think that the Council of Nicaea, like the things that they came up with, were necessarily bad or wrong. But what happened is, and this is my interpretation, of course, Constantine is losing grip on Rome. And a big part of that is because the Christian movement is just multiplying like crazy. And the vast majority of those Christians are pacifists and refuse to fight in the Roman army. Not all of them, but most of them. So what's going on is he's losing control of things. And I believe that he brings these people together and says, I've got to embrace this in order to keep the empire together. And when he does that, he creates a code of rules, a rule book, and a priestly class. And when he does that, he basically makes Christianity into a mirror of the pagan religions that were a part of Roman society at the time, including mixing in a lot of the holidays. From that point on, the church stopped being the oppressed, grassroots, anarchic movement of Jesus and became a power. I think that was a big mistake. But when they became this power, you see a 60-year period, just a 60-year period from when the Council of Nicaea happened until Christians are murdering other Christians because they have the wrong doctrine. It's only 60 years. So this is pretty crazy what's going on. So at that point, the official Church of Rome becomes, in a lot of respects, the oppressor. Throughout history, you've had times where the church is the oppressor, and you've had times where the church is the oppressed. It's interesting that when the church is the oppressed, it grows faster and more healthily than when it is the oppressor.
And
Because
would
the church, go,
and would you say uh, where where would you say the church is now? Then are we the oppressed or the oppressor, or is it in different context in different parts of the world?
well, it would definitely be a different context in different parts of the world. Um, but I think what the church has done is, even in a lot of places where the church is being oppressed, it set itself up as a power. So even in the structure where, okay, the church itself might be being oppressed, but the church maintains within its own hierarchy an oppression of the people within it. So in the church, women are oppressed, homosexuals are oppressed, um, people that maybe aren't as educated are oppressed, the poor are oppressed. So even if you're in a church like the church in China, where it was really, really being oppressed, within that oppression, oftentimes there's more oppression if you don't happen to be a part of the church's hierarchy.
Hmm.
See, what God does is he takes this idea and he turns it. So from a Christian perspective, the person that is most like Christ should be the biggest servant and slave of everybody. And all the bullshit about, well, if I am the leader of hundreds of thousands of people, I'm serving them. It's crap. It's all crap. Because you're serving them while you're driving around in your Lexus and you're telling people what to do. And in a lot of places, you're taking people's jobs away from them because they don't agree with your point of view. It's crap. Serving means serving.
Have you read the book by Kathy Escobar, Upside Down Church?
No, I haven't.
The things that you're talking about. Have you met Kathy before? She's a good friend of mine as
I
well.
just talked to her online a little bit.
She wrote this book called Upside Down Church, and it talks a lot about that inversion you're talking about. How if you are going to be a leader in the church, it's a servant role versus this pyramid scheme that a lot of us have bought into, where the shit trickles downhill.
Right, right. Oh, it absolutely. And I know it's really controversial to say a lot of the things that I say, but I think the whole and we've gotten into this a little bit ourselves, but I think the whole idea of pastors being paid and stuff just buys right into it.
Yeah.
Why do I need to get paid to be a servant to these people? That we're all servants to one another. We're all submitted to one another in love, like the scripture says. So if I can work, I work. Why would I not work? I go and I work. I'm just like they are. They have to work, so we work. And if we can share a home together, then maybe all of us can work less. And then we can have more time to love each other and love the people in our neighborhoods and care for the poor and the mentally ill and the people that have just been shit on by society. But when you have a system where the productive people pay the professional to care for the spiritual needs of the other people, you wind up, in my opinion, really shortcutting the whole discipleship thing and adding into a culture of consumerism where, look, I pay the pro to give me the good stuff, and I think that's basically where the rise of the mega churches come from. Is you've got basically you have.
Which you are talking from experience, though, because you've pastored in a megachurch before. And
Oh, no.
You didn't.
No, I've
Yeah.
spoken. I've spoken.
Okay, but
No,
you've had some practical experience, though. My point is with the megachurch, and so you're speaking from a place of experience, not a place of theory.
Well, ye- I don't want to be dishonest in any way.
Yeah.
Most of my most of my entanglements with the mega church have been really bad for me.
Gotcha.
I have been uh, victimized in some ways. I've been really harangued and harassed and called a cult and stuff like that by a lot of people from mega churches.
Gotcha.
Um, I have had a bit to do with people that are at mega churches. I've helped some people to kind of,
Get
I
out of the
guess,
megachurch.
oh, I've helped a lot of people kind of get out of the mega church. One of the things that I I kind of struggle with is when I sit down, particularly with youth pastors, because they're young and they really they want to do things right. They're not so embedded in the system yet. And I sit down with them and we start talking, and I start asking them what they're doing. Um, and I unfortunately, it's like too often what they're doing is they're just running they're running activities on a cruise ship. Keep the kids happy, keep them here in the fold while while we build this big church. Um, but yeah, it's just been really difficult. I think more like our experience with the mega church has more been helping people heal from the damage from the mega churches.
Gotcha.
When we were when we were in a more traditional church, it only had 100 well, we were at one church where we were youth leaders, and I think they were about 400 or 500 members. So that's not a mega church in my understanding of the
Yeah.
term.
Sure.
And then when we were the youth pastors in Corona, the church had about 150 members. So some of the stuff we tried to do in the beginning was very mega churchy. We started a thing called alternative church where we'd have bands come play. So we'd have Christian punk rock bands play, and I'd give a message that would be very applicable to people, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, and the idea was that the people from our youth group would meet and entangle with those people and this and that. And eventually, we had a youth group of 30 people, and we got 150 kids showing up every Sunday night. The elders were happy, but I realized that there's 120 kids from other youth groups in town. We weren't reaching the lost for Jesus. We were providing good Christian entertainment for good Christian kids. I wasn't interested in that. What I was interested in is the kids from the streets that I grew up with.
So that leads into my next question, and I know we have a limited amount of time, and so I want to give some practical application of this of Christian anarchy. I know that you and Raquel, your wife, have a house church in Long Beach, and what is the name, or if you have a name for your house church, and B, how does this philosophy, if you will, of Christian anarchy play out within your own faith community?
Okay, well, we don't have a name.
Spoken like a true anarchist.
Chad Myers, who's a brilliant Bible guy, he's a mentor to me, and he's pushing us to have a name. He really wants us to have a name. But our community, and I guess this would be a good example. We sit down, I say, hey, Chad thinks that we should have a name so we could be easily found by people. People can connect with us. There can be some kind of understanding of us as a movement. What do you think? And everyone talks about it. And ultimately, we didn't reach a decision. So we don't do anything. We talk about it the next week. And the ultimate conclusion says we don't need a name. And so we don't have a name. but we do call ourselves things, you know. So one of the people used to call it anarchist Bible study. No, that's what she calls it, anarchist Bible study. And she's an atheist gal who's the chapter leader of Food Not Bombs in Long Beach. I call it the church with no name. A lot of people just call it Monday nights. You know, ultimately we haven't found that we needed to really identify ourselves that much. As far as like some of the things we do, we get involved with things that are going on in the community. So my wife's volunteering at a thing called COA, which is a number of different Christian churches in Long Beach that get together to provide services for the poor and the homeless. So she's doing some volunteer work with them. On Sunday mornings, we take a bunch of food down to the park and we have breakfast with the homeless people that live there.
And that's not just to give them food, that's actually just to, like, I want to make the distinction because, like, here in Fort Worth, we've got a lot of quote-unquote ministries that drop off food in the homeless section of Fort Worth and never have any type of relationship with these people because they can feel guilt-free that they've actually done something with the poor. What you all are doing is actually to have relationships with these people and be involved in their lives. Because I remember last time we were in Long Beach, when we were visiting you all, there was a gentleman, I don't remember his circumstance, but he needed a hotel for a couple of nights. And you all had met him and began a relationship with him with these Sunday morning breakfasts that you all provide. And you all have a communal pot that the community decides, and what I mean by communal pot, a stash of monies that the community gives, and you all decide as a community where those monies go to. And so you as a community had decided to help this guy out for a couple of days and put him in a hotel. And that really struck me about, as a community, you all decided that and that you were going to provide for him. So I just wanted to clarify that this is just not a food drop, that this is actually relationship building.
Right, and I think that's the difference between an anarchist perspective. We're not the good together, wholesome people that are helping out the dregs of society. We enter into their lives and become part of them. I specifically use the words, we have breakfast with them, because that's what we do. We don't give them food. We sit down and we eat with them, and we become, and there's a big difference between, look, there's a starting place, and everyone should start somewhere and start wherever you need to. So I'm not dismissing the things that other people do, but there is a big difference between taking a ladle and splatting something on someone's plate or in their bowl and staying across a counter. There's a big difference between that and sitting next to someone who'd shit their pants.
Yeah. And
eating with them. That's a big difference. Now, what happens is,
and you're not meaning that in a pretentious, pious way. You're just talking about hands-on. This is what we feel that this is a part of our calling as Christians and as anarchists to be involved in people's lives like this.
Absolutely. And what happens is, in the process of becoming a part of their life, you help them to become empowered to grow out of the situations that they're in. So it's not some kind of handout. It's more of like, hey, what can we do together to get you to where you want to be? Some of them don't want to move. Some of them want to stay there. We love them right where they're at. Hey, if you just want to be a drunk who lives in the park, then we love you anyways. But what happens is that drunk who just wants to live in the park, one day that guy might go, or that gal might say, I just can't do this anymore. And we're there because we've been there for 4 years, every single week. And at that point, we say, well, what would you like us to do?
Mm.
And whether that's getting someone a hotel for a couple of days, driving them to the rehab. In one case, we drove a gal out. This gal had been gang raped. She'd been beaten up by her boyfriend. She had lost her husband, her father, and her son, or her grandson, sorry, within a 6-month period. And one day, after she just being a drunken mess for months, one day she says, I want to go home. I put her in my truck. We drove to her house. I met with her mom, sat down and had breakfast. My second breakfast that day.
What are you, a damn hobbit?
Yeah. And then we got her in a rehab center, and she just called me a few weeks ago. She's been sober for 8 months. She sounds like a different person. She's being trained to get back in the workforce. Her life has completely changed. It's just a matter of being there. It's a matter of being there for people rather than saying, okay, we're here to save you. Because ultimately, when you come to save other people, whether it's from a spiritual sense or from an economic or whatever other kind of sense, when you come to do that, you're basically you're putting your own expectations and your own ideas onto them, and you're being very patristic. You're not being like Jesus, who says, come as you are. And so that's the difference. One of the things that I think was really that it was a good example of how we do things differently is everyone is welcome to throw money into the box. Okay? You throw the money in the box, and if you throw the money in the box, you get a vote in how the money in the box is spent. If you don't throw money in the box, you get a say. You get to say, you know what, I think this. But you don't get a vote, okay? Which may or may not be anarchist, I don't know. But at one point, we had to just kind of say, okay, there has to be some level of ownership. If there's something that needs $50 or less, if 2 people agree, they just go get the money out of the box and take care of it. If it's over $50, the church has to agree on it. And so what we do is we come together and we say, look, we want to spend this much money on this. We don't need to have complete 100% agreement, but we have to have complete 100% permission.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you get agreement, you can be, ruthlessly controlled by one person. But in this situation, the rest of the people say, look, if this is really, really important to you that we not do this, then we won't do this. But we'd like your permission to go forward since most of us believe otherwise.
That's awesome. I like that a lot.
And so ultimately what we do is we make decisions as a group. When we meet together, I teach maybe a quarter, a third of the time. But we have a sheet. We have one thing that's you either do worship, confession, communion, or prayer. It's one of those 4. We have the leading the Bible discussion time. We have dinner. So we pass around the sheet, and everyone signs up for one of those things over the month. So each month, and cleanup's the other. So each month I'll clean up, I'll make dinner, I'll teach. Someone else will lead communion, they might teach. Everyone takes turns doing that. So we share the things, and you never just, even if you're doing a bit of teaching, you never just teach. It's always, okay, now let's discuss this. Let's include each other. Let's be a part of this together. And so again, it's trying to break down this idea that, okay, John's the pastor. My nickname's the Rev, but nobody at my church is allowed to call me that, and nobody calls me pastor. I'm just John, and Raquel's just Raquel, and we really seek to just be, normal part of the body, because then there's not this idea that anything less is expected out of anybody else. Everyone's expected to pull their weight, so
I like
that,
that a lot.
yeah.
Well, I know that you have to get going, so real quick, if folks want to find out more about Christian anarchy, what are some resources people can find, some books or websites that you will suggest for them?
Okay, now this is funny because the words Christian anarchy are never ever used in the book. But I
Okay.
think it's a real good primer for what I'm talking about. And it's the book Jesus for President by Chris Haw and Shane Claiborne.
Yep.
It's actually really good, as far as a lot of the theory behind it, but it never calls it Christian anarchy. But that's what it is.
You mean it's not Purpose Driven Church by your buddy Rick Warren?
No, I wouldn't pick that one. Uh, there, if you like heady stuff, Anarchy and Christianity by Jacques Ellul is the classic. The Kingdom of God is Within You by Tolstoy. He's a bit hardcore, but he had a huge influence on Gandhi. And But to me, the guys that really have made the most difference in my life is Ched Myers, who wrote Binding the Strong Man. Who it's really hard reading, and Dave Andrews. And Dave Andrews, the two books that I would recommend the most for this subject is Not Religion But Love and Christianarchy, and they've just been released in the United States. So it used to be really hard to get them here, but now you can get them, and they're fairly affordable. So I'd really recommend that. Dave Andrews, it's real practical. He tells a lot of stories, and I mean, I've been in his house. I've been with his family. I've seen what they do. He's been doing this for like 40 or 50 years, and man, I mean, he's a dirty hippie, but I like him. I really like him. So I'd really,
And that's a lot for you to say because you have a hard time with dirty hippies.
yeah, man. I'm an old punk rocker, So,
That's funny. So if folks want to find your community in Long Beach, even though you don't have a name or a website, how can they find you?
well, they can come to my website, johnthereverend.com. I haven't been posting much on that lately, but maybe I should get back to it. They can look me up on Facebook. It's just John Jensen. And I can tell you how to get there. It's an absolutely open community, so it's not that we're trying to hide or anything like that. It's just that we don't want to market ourselves, So yeah, John Jensen on Facebook or johnthereverend.com on that's my blog, and either of those places you can get a hold of me.
You can also find you on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
Twitter is Rev3J.
Three.
Rev3J. I'm not on Twitter as much anymore because it's just too hard to argue with people in 140 characters.
So true.
I just got tired of doing that. So, and I argue a lot, even though I'm just a happy guy. And would it be okay if I made a little bit of an appeal?
Absolutely.
It's it's Christmas season. It's getting colder, and I just ran out of scotch, and so I can't afford to buy it myself. But if anyone would like to send me scotch, just get a hold of me. I'll give you my address because I need some scotch.
And if you want to tithe some of that scotch to me, I'll take some of it too. I may be the whiskey preacher, but I'm not prejudiced against different types of whiskey.
See, but you come from bourbon country,
I've been drinking more straight whiskey of late, so
Okay,
yeah.
Good for you.
Well, thank you, John, for joining Outlaw Theology with the Whiskey Preacher. I really appreciate your time, and go Christian Anarchy.
Yes, and have me back sometime.
Absolutely. It's only
Talk about something else.
It's only taking 2.5, 3 years to actually get you on here.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention that.
I love you, brother. Thanks for joining us, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you, mate.
Bye.